Welcome to Transmission Podcast. I'm your host, Cecilia Lynn Jacobs. For the next little while, we invite you to speculate on the possibility of life on Proxima b, the closest known planet outside of our solar system that has the potential to support life. In each episode, we question what would happen if we suddenly knew we were no longer alone in the universe, and what that would mean for humanity to become an interstellar civilization. Please, stay close.
You know, we're programmed to do this, to send people to places they're not supposed to be. It's the reason that we are where we are today, because, you know, we have moved from, you know, a small location in Africa to across the entire surface of the planet into places we were never evolved to cope in. And we learned to adapt to those conditions. You could argue it's in our DNA, or it's in our instinct to do these things. So, you know, at some point, if we have the technology, we will eventually do it. It's a question of waiting for that technology to come around.
That's Dr. Duncan Forgan of University St Andrews. On this episode of Transmission Podcast, we consider the ethical implications of sending humans on a long-term interstellar mission.
The fact is, humans make space exploration very expensive.
That's Rhae Adams, and he works in asteroid mining. That field currently focuses on automation when it comes to piloting spacecrafts. Rhae explains why we don't send, or plan to send, humans to asteroids anytime soon.
If you're dealing with robots, you know, you don't have to worry about life support systems. You don't have to worry about radiation shielding, or, you know, giving food and water and all this extra weight that's kind of associated with taking humans through space. That's not to say that, you know, our spacecraft can think like a human, and I think really there's no replacement for our ability to problem solve, our ability to adapt and change and, you know, fix problems as they come up to us. We try to design as much autonomy into our robotic systems as we can to replace that, but ultimately, of course, it's never going to quite be like the real thing.
The benefit of sending a human boils down to the fact that we're not very good at making artificial intelligence. We do not know how to create an intelligence with the same flexibility, problem-solving skills, and just general adaptiveness as a human.
That's Duncan Forgan at University St Andrews. Humans simply make better decisions faster than machines, for now at least.
So as we understand it, the human brain is the best computer ever evolved, and we do not know how to design a better one. And the same argument applies to going to, say, to Mars. We can certainly send lots of rovers to Mars, and the rovers can explore the environment, but they do so under human control and command. And really what we want to do is we want to send humans to that planet so that we can send effectively a geologist who can look at the landscape with their eyes and start to identify things that you just don't see in a camera. Even with a high-resolution image, being there gives humans more perspectives. It gives us a better opportunity to look for patterns, because humans are amongst the best pattern matchers out there. So all of these things are why you want to send a person.
It's important to note that when we consider sending a manned mission over such a great distance, we will effectively create an offshoot civilization.
It's not as if we can send a team and then get feedback on what they've found. It's more like we're sending an envoy, but really we basically go our separate ways, and we hope that our ancestors will be able to eventually get feedback from this other civilization that has been basically split off from us existing on Earth.
That was Dr. Joel Meyers at the Canadian Institute for Theoretical Astrophysics. It also begs the question, will the descendants of the first crew even want to be there? Producer Kate Ladenheim discusses this with Dr. Beth Billar.
Think about like the existential teenage angst you get if you're growing up in a small town, like a very isolated small town in the middle of nowhere. It would be like that, except in outer space. Like, I can just imagine the parent fights, like, I didn't choose to be here. You did this to me.
You have a real serious ethical question there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because the parents, in this case, chose to leave Earth.
Mm-hmm.
the children are not given this choice. They're going into who knows what.
Unknown, potentially with extremely limited options on a one-way situation. That's a lot of emotional needs to provide for. But technically, you'd have, in addition to a crack psychotherapy team. As Dr. Kathryn Denning at York University told us, it's not a small thing to consider.
The idea of actually undertaking an interstellar voyage, that's big. The idea of leaving Earth and never coming back, that's big. The idea of leaving any world, whether that's a cultural world, a social world, a family, and never coming back, that's big. I think most of us can identify with some aspects of journeys like that. Many of us have, whether it's a small thing like going away to school, knowing that you can return, it's still big. Whether it's breaking up a family when you thought you'd be together forever, that's big. But it's just that much bigger, I think, to contemplate actually leaving the only planet that we know that we can live on and putting yourself in a tin can for an extremely long voyage to another star system. That's such a mind-boggling large thing to even contemplate.
Whoever does make the decision to send humans on a multi-generational voyage will have to think seriously about the psychological impact of the journey. Will those on board be able to cope? Dr. Alires Almon works with an organization called 100 Year Starship, which looks at the future of interstellar travel. She researches the psychological impacts of long-term isolation. We spoke with her about how we might consider our mental survival.
Right. So a lot of this information is based on, research of past studies. You do see isolation from, the military and working in submarines. And then you have those studies of groups and teams in Antarctica. There's another group called High Seas. It's the Hawaiian Institute. I forget what the rest of the acronym is, but they take scientists and they basically isolate them for a year and simulate long-term space travel. And what's interesting when you read what they're able to release, the first thing that these individuals talk about are their relationships. It's like, this is what, we got the task done. That was easy. That was a day-to-day thing that kept us purposeful in our work. But when the team leader has a bad day, how does that affect the team? And those are the anecdotes that really resonate and what I've used for my research. Also, looking at past studies of individuals who have done actual, discussions with astronauts and looking at really, again, like you said, their journal entries and things like that have been released. You see this ebb and flow of not only just confidence, but their relationships. One of the things I found is a lot of the research is focused on the individual and how the individual reacts with the group and not necessarily the maturity and the growth of the group as a whole. So if the three of us were to become a team, how do we grow as a team and what's the growth of our team? So if you're looking at preparing a crew to go on a mission, you're not only looking at, okay, can this person do the task? Do we have the tasks covered? Second, can this person survive the environment? This is an isolating environment. Can they survive that way physiologically and psychologically as well? And then the third step is, then out of this pool of the people who, passed the first two, what is the best group that we can create from that? And then looking at that group and how that group interacts and how that group grows. And that group maturity will evolve as the mission goes on. So one of my hypotheses is that the longer the journey, the sooner that a group will have a breakdown. They're dealing with uncertainty, but there will be crises along the way. And as you encounter crises and manage through them, the easier they are to manage and the less of a negative impact that crisis will have, that second, third, fourth crisis will have, because the group will have the ability to know that they can manage through it.
What are the questions we have to ask in order to be able to decide if we go? And then, how do we decide who would go?
How are people going to be forthright about psychological distress? So if I say I'm having a bad day, everyone has to understand maybe that's just a bad day. That's not saying that I don't have the ability to do my task. I don't have the ability to do my part. So part of one of the barriers is acknowledging that psychological distress will happen, that it's okay, and that if we can find the signs of it and address it as it happens and just give people, kind of like a soft landing. And a psychological distress, it depends, just like here on Earth. We don't know how people are going to react to stress. We don't know how they're going to react to different things. One person can just start to lash out at people, yell, have a short temper, and not want to talk to someone. One person be very vocal, the other person saying, I'm just going to go stay in my corner for the next 2 days and not talk to you, because that's how I react to stress. And another person is going to be like, you know what, I'm going to yell at you every time because you can't do anything right, I can't do anything right, and you just get this frustration. Some people can get physical, you just don't know. But I think people are very careful to manage that. The question is, when we get into deep space, you can manage it and have help maybe for, 6 to 8 months. But when we're talking years and years and years, depending on how we design the mission and the environment that people are going to go in, it can have all kinds of different results when it comes to that impact, or the way that people express that impact.
We spoke with Pippa Goldschmidt, a writer in Edinburgh who's worked on astronomy and space policy, but now writes fiction based on real science. Would you be interested in going on such a journey?
Some people want to be astronauts, some people want to go into outer space, and some people don't. They'd rather sort of sit here on the safety of their own Earth. I'm probably fall into the latter category. I'm such a physical, scaredy cat, but at the same time, it'd be fascinating. In terms of how you organise yourself, talking with my policy hat on, again, I would say that the United Nations would be the obvious way to organise and coordinate a mission, but you need the expertise of individual sort of countries and individual people. So I'm talking about this very sort of theoretically. I don't know whether I'd go and hide under the bed, or whether I'd be inspired to sort of create something, or both. Perhaps I'd go off and create something while simultaneously hiding under the bed. I don't know.
While there are those who will be very keen to go on the first interstellar mission, there will also be people like Pippa who prefer to be more firmly rooted here on Earth. When we return, more on the gravity of this decision. Stay close. Welcome back. In this episode of Transmission Podcast, we're talking about what it would mean to send people on an interstellar journey. Perhaps we need to use this as an opportunity to look at our own planet. Kathryn Denning reminds us that there is already intelligent life right here on Earth.
And it's interesting because from the anthropological perspective, this is kind of the ultimate idea, right? The notion of contact with, other intelligent species from other worlds, that's kind of, the absolute intellectual dream. But from my own perspective, I've also learned to focus rather differently about all the work that we kind of need to do here. Our own intelligent species that have evolved on this Earth. I'm talking about, all the non-human animals that are here too. They could use a little bit more attention, or actually a lot more attention from us when we're looking at, the imminent extinction of so many of them. Whether we're talking about various whale species, whether we're talking about elephants who are now in much more serious trouble than anybody expected them to be, whether we're talking about all our primate relatives. all of these quote unquote aliens